The morning rain drummed against the windows of Meridian Luxury Department Store as Marcus Chun adjusted the collar of his Navy maintenance uniform. His calloused hands, still soft from years behind executive desks, gripped the mop handle with unfamiliar weight. At 38, he had built an empire of retail excellence. But today he stood invisible among the polished marble floors of his own flagship store. 6 months had passed since the funeral. 6 months since cancer had stolen away Elena, leaving him alone with 80-year-old Lily and a growing realization that he had lost touch with the very people who made his success possible. The thought of his daughter, waiting at daycare with her gap-toothed smile and endless questions about why Daddy had to work so much, strengthened his resolve. Marcus pushed the industrial cart through the main corridor, its wheels squeaking against the pristine tiles. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows overhead, while mannequins in $1,000 gowns watched with glassy indifference. He had walked these same halls countless times in tailored suits, reviewing quarterly reports and approving expansion plans. Now, from 3 feet lower and behind a janitor's cart, everything looked different. The morning shift was beginning. Sales associates emerged from the employee entrance, their faces carrying the weight of commission pressures and customer demands. Marcus recognized some of them from company photographs, though none looked his way. To them, he was just another maintenance worker, as invisible as the dust he swept away. A young woman with tired eyes and carefully braided hair caught his attention. She moved with quiet dignity despite her obvious exhaustion, straightening displays with practiced efficiency. Her name tag read Rosa Delacroix, and something in her gentle manner reminded Marcus of Elena's grace under pressure. Rosa paused at a jewelry counter, running her fingers along its edge with the reverence of someone who could never afford what lay beneath the glass. The store's morning ritual unfolded around Marcus like a choreographed dance. Department heads emerged from their offices, clipboards in hand, surveying their domains with critical eyes. The fragrance counter girls practiced their spray techniques, while the shoe department arranged displays with geometric precision. Everyone had their role, their purpose, their invisible contribution to the machine Marcus had built from a distance. As he worked, Marcus listened. Really listened, perhaps for the first time in years. He heard the quiet conversations about rent increases and sick children, about second jobs and broken-down cars. These weren't just employee numbers on spreadsheets anymore. They were real people with real struggles, fighting to survive in a shadow of luxury they could never possess. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Lily's daycare teacher. "Everything okay, sweetie," it read, followed by a photo of his daughter building blocks into a tower. Marcus smiled, remembering her words from that morning. "You look different, Daddy, like you're going on an adventure." She was right, though she could never understand the kind of adventure this would become. The morning sun climbed higher, casting golden rectangles across the sales floor. Marcus continued his work, mopping and dusting and observing, preparing himself for whatever truths lay ahead. He had built this empire believing he understood excellence, but now he wondered if he had been measuring the wrong things all along. In the distance, heels clicked against marble with sharp authority. The sound grew closer, carrying with it an energy that made several employees straighten their shoulders and busy themselves with sudden urgency. Marcus looked up from his work, sensing that his real education was about to begin. The clicking heels belonged to a woman whose presence commanded immediate attention throughout the store. Patricia Blackwood swept across the sales floor like a storm front, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to stretch her features into permanent disapproval. Her black blazer was impeccably tailored, her jewelry understated but expensive, and her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who measured human worth in quarterly profits. Marcus continued mopping, keeping his head down while his peripheral vision tracked her movement. Patricia paused at the cosmetics counter where a young associate named Tremaine was arranging lipstick displays. The boy couldn't be more than 19, his movements careful and precise as he aligned each tube with mathematical precision. "You call this organized," Patricia's voice cut through the morning air with razor sharpness. Tremaine looked up, confusion flickering across his youthful features. The reds are completely out of sequence, and don't get me started on your pathetic attempt at color coordination. Do they not teach basic retail principles anymore, or are you simply too dense to learn them? Tremaine's face flushed as other employees glanced over with sympathetic discomfort. I can fix it right away, Mrs. Blackwood. He stammered, his hands already reaching for the misaligned products. I thought the grouping looked better with the seasonal colors highlighted, but I can rearrange everything to match the planogram exactly. You thought, Patricia repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. That's your problem right there. You're not paid to think. You're paid to follow instructions and execute them flawlessly. When I want your creative input, I'll ask for it, which frankly will be never. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he watched the interaction unfold. He had built his company culture around respect and empowerment, encouraging every employee to contribute ideas and take ownership of their work. What he was witnessing represented everything he stood against, yet here it was happening under his own roof, in his own store. Patricia moved on to the women's clothing section, where Rosa was steaming wrinkles from a display of evening gowns. The older woman's technique was flawless, each movement economical and effective, born from years of experience in caring for fine fabrics. She worked with a quiet concentration that spoke of pride in her craft. Rosa, Patricia barked, causing the older woman to startle slightly. The steam wand in her hand paused mid-motion. These dresses look acceptable, I suppose, though I question whether someone with your limited education can truly understand the subtleties of luxury garment care. Try not to damage anything too expensive today. We both know you couldn't afford to replace even the cheapest item in this section. Rosa's dignity held steady despite the cruel words, but Marcus saw the slight tremor in her hands as she resumed her work. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood, she replied quietly, her voice carrying decades of practiced composure in the face of casual cruelty. The morning routine continued with Patricia's reign of intimidation. She criticized the shoe department's display angle, questioned the fragrance counter sales numbers from the previous day, and made cutting remarks about the jewelry section's cleanliness standards. Each interaction left another employee diminished, their confidence chipped away by her relentless negativity. Marcus pushed his cart closer to the management offices, his maintenance duties providing perfect cover for observation. Through the glass partition, he could see Patricia at her desk, reviewing reports with the same cold efficiency she applied to human management. Her office walls were covered with sales charts and productivity metrics, but nowhere did he see recognition of employee achievements or team photographs that might suggest she valued the people behind the numbers. A soft whimper from the supply closet caught his attention. Marcus glanced around to ensure he wasn't being watched, then quietly approached the partially open door. Inside, he glimpsed Rosa Delacroix sitting on an overturned bucket, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This was his store, his responsibility, his failure. He wanted to speak, to comfort her, to reveal who he was and promise immediate change. But his mission required patience and deeper understanding. Rose's tears represented more than one moment of cruelty. They reflected a systemic culture that had somehow flourished despite his intentions, a culture he needed to fully comprehend before he could effectively dismantle it. Marcus quietly retreated, his heart heavy with newfound knowledge. The real work of this investigation had only just begun. The supply closet smelled of industrial cleaner and quiet desperation. Marcus waited until the corridor emptied before gently knocking on the doorframe. Rosa Delacroix looked up with red-rimmed eyes, hastily wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. Her dignity reasserted itself, even in this moment of vulnerability, spine straightening despite the cramped space. "I'm sorry," she whispered, moving to stand. "I shouldn't be in here during work hours. I'll get back to the floor immediately." Marcus held up a gentle hand, his voice soft with understanding. "No need to apologize. Sometimes we all need a moment to ourselves." He stepped back, giving her space while remaining close enough to show he cared. His maintenance uniform made him safe, another invisible worker who understood the weight of Patricia's cruelty. Rosa studied his face, perhaps surprised by the kindness in his tone. "Most people just walk by," she said quietly. "Pretend they don't see anything. It's easier that way, I suppose." The morning light filtering through the high window caught the silver threads in Rosa's carefully maintained hair. She carried herself with a grace that spoke of better times, of a life that had held more promise before circumstances narrowed her choices to this daily endurance. "You don't deserve what happened out there," Marcus said carefully, testing the boundaries of his disguise. "No one should speak to another person that way, regardless of their position." A bitter smile touched Rosa's lips. "Mrs. Blackwood has made it clear that people like me are replaceable, dispensable. She's probably right. At 56, with only a high school education, jobs like this don't come easy anymore." Marcus felt his heart constrict. Rosa's words carried the resignation of someone who had internalized years of systematic devaluation. The company he had built to honor human dignity had somehow become a place where good people apologized for their own existence. "Tell me about your family," Marcus said, settling his back against the doorframe. "Sometimes talking helps." Rosa's eyes softened with maternal warmth. "I have a daughter, Esperanza. She's in her second year of nursing school at the community college, working double shifts while studying, determined to make something better of herself." Her voice carried fierce pride mixed with worry. "My mother lives with us too. Diabetes took her sight 2 years ago, but her spirit remains strong." The pieces of Rosa's story assembled themselves in Marcus's mind. 3 generations of women supporting each other, scraping together resources for education and medical care. Rosa's job at the store wasn't just employment. It was the foundation holding her family's dreams together. "That's why you can't afford to lose this position," Marcus said gently, understanding flooding his voice. Rosa nodded, fresh tears threatening. "The insurance helps with Mama's medications. Without it, we'd have to choose between her insulin and Esperanza's tuition. Mrs. Blackwood knows this, of course. She knows exactly how trapped we all are." The calculation in Patricia's cruelty became clearer. She wielded people's vulnerabilities like weapons, using their desperation to maintain absolute control. Every employee became complicit in their own mistreatment because the alternative meant watching their family suffer. "You're not trapped," Marcus said with quiet conviction. "Good people deserve good treatment, regardless of their circumstances. Your daughter sounds remarkable, and she's remarkable because she learned strength from watching you." Rosa's composure finally cracked, tears flowing freely. "I used to manage a boutique in the French Quarter," she confessed. "Before the recession, before my husband's accident, before everything fell apart. I understood fashion, had relationships with vendors, built customer loyalty. Now I steam dresses I once sold, listening to lectures about my limited education." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Rosa wasn't just a competent employee. She was an experienced retail professional, reduced to menial tasks by circumstances beyond her control. Her expertise was being wasted, her contributions minimized, her dignity systematically stripped away. "That knowledge hasn't disappeared," Marcus said firmly. "Experience like yours doesn't just vanish because of job titles or uniforms." Rosa looked at him with genuine curiosity. "You speak like someone who understands business. Have you worked retail before?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I've learned that the best leaders are often found in unexpected places. Sometimes the person mopping floors knows more about customer service than the person behind the desk." A small smile broke through Rosa's tears. "You're kind to say that. Most people see the uniform and assume that's all there is." The sound of approaching footsteps ended their conversation. Rosa quickly composed herself, smoothing her hair and straightening her shoulders. Marcus stepped aside as she emerged from the supply closet with renewed purpose. Her brief moment of vulnerability transformed back into professional competence. "Thank you," she whispered as she passed, "for listening, for seeing me." Marcus watched her walk away, her dignity intact despite everything she endured. He now understood that his mission had evolved beyond simple observation. These weren't just employees. They were skilled professionals whose talents were being systematically suppressed by a culture of fear and intimidation. The afternoon brought a fresh wave of customers, and with them, Patricia Blackwood's heightened scrutiny of every employee interaction. Marcus positioned himself near the main sales floor, methodically cleaning display cases while observing the dynamics he had helped create without ever truly seeing. Rosa had returned to her post at the evening wear section, her earlier vulnerability replaced by focused professionalism. She moved between the gowns with practiced efficiency, her trained, eye-catching details that others missed. When a well-dressed customer approached seeking a dress for a charity gala, Rosa's expertise became immediately apparent. The emerald silk would complement your complexion beautifully, Rosa suggested, her voice warm with genuine knowledge. The cut is particularly flattering for your figure, and the designer used hand-sewn beadwork that catches light magnificently. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had spent years understanding fashion, not just handling it. The customer's face brightened with interest. You seem to know quite a lot about these pieces. Have you worked in fashion long? Before Rosa could respond, Patricia's sharp voice cut across the conversation like a blade through silk. Rosa, what exactly do you think you're doing? Both women turned as Patricia approached with predatory focus. Her smile was razor-thin as she addressed the customer directly. I apologize for any confusion. Rosa here is our garment maintenance specialist. For actual fashion consultation, you'll want to speak with our trained sales associates who understand the sophisticated needs of our distinguished clientele. Rosa's face flushed with humiliation, but she maintained her composure. I was simply helping the customer find what she needed, Mrs. Blackwood. That's exactly the problem, Patricia replied, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby shoppers. You seem to have forgotten your role here. You're paid to steam and organize, not to play dress-up consultant with customers who deserve professional service. Marcus watched the scene unfold with growing outrage. The customer looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the inappropriate nature of Patricia's public dressing down. Other employees scattered like leaves before a storm, unwilling to draw Patricia's attention to themselves. Actually, the customer interjected with diplomatic firmness. She was being quite helpful. Her knowledge seems extensive. Patricia's smile became even more brittle. How thoughtful of you to say. However, I must insist on maintaining our service standards. Rosa, please return to your assigned duties immediately. I'll handle this customer's needs personally. Rosa nodded silently, her earlier confidence evaporating under Patricia's calculated cruelty. She retreated to the steaming station, her movements careful and measured despite the obvious humiliation. Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself slightly smaller than before. The customer, clearly disturbed by what she had witnessed, made polite excuses and left without purchasing anything. Patricia watched her go with visible irritation, then turned her attention to other employees who had observed the interaction. Let this be a reminder to everyone, Patricia announced, her voice carrying across the department. We all have specific roles and responsibilities. Overstepping those boundaries doesn't demonstrate initiative. It demonstrates insubordination. Some people seem to forget that job security depends on knowing one's place. Marcus felt his hands tighten around the cleaning cloth. He had built his company on the principle that every employee's knowledge and experience was valuable, that customer service was everyone's responsibility regardless of their title. What he was witnessing represented a complete perversion of those values. Tremaine, the young cosmetics associate from the morning, caught Marcus's eye from across the floor. The boy's face reflected the same mixture of anger and helplessness that Marcus felt. Other employees went about their duties with renewed tension, everyone hyper-aware of Patricia's scrutinizing presence. The rest of the afternoon passed in a climate of suppressed fear. Employees second-guessed their interactions, avoided eye contact with customers who might engage them in conversation, and performed their duties with mechanical precision that lacked any warmth or personality. The vibrant customer service culture Marcus thought he had fostered had been replaced by something cold and transactional. During his break, Marcus found himself in the employee cafeteria, a utilitarian space in the building's basement that felt worlds away from the luxury upstairs. Rosa sat alone at a corner table, picking at a small salad while reading a nursing textbook that clearly belonged to her daughter. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus asked, carrying his own modest lunch. Rosa looked up with weary acceptance. "Of course, though I'm probably not the best company right now." "Rough day," Marcus observed, settling into the plastic chair. Rosa closed the textbook with a soft sigh. "I should have known better than to speak with that customer. Mrs. Blackwood was right. It's not my place. I just couldn't help myself when I saw that beautiful emerald dress. It reminded me of better times." "You were helping a customer find exactly what she needed," Marcus said firmly. "That's good business, not overstepping boundaries." "Good business doesn't matter when you're expendable," Rosa replied with quiet bitterness. "Mrs. Blackwood made that very clear today, in front of everyone." Marcus watched her face, seeing the accumulated weight of years of such moments. Each small humiliation had chipped away at her confidence until she apologized for sharing knowledge that could have made the company money and pleased a customer. The systematic destruction of human dignity was complete and efficient. The following morning brought Marcus to work with a new sense of purpose. He had spent the previous evening researching employee support programs and reviewing company policies that had apparently been forgotten or deliberately ignored. His conversation with Lily over breakfast had strengthened his resolve when she asked why he looked so sad lately. "People sometimes forget how to be kind to each other, Daddy," she had said with 80-year-old wisdom while spreading peanut butter on her toast. "Maybe you can remind them." Now, pushing his maintenance cart through the early morning quiet, Marcus began implementing small acts of support that wouldn't compromise his cover. He started by leaving encouraging notes in places where struggling employees would find them. A simple, "Your hard work matters," tucked into Rose's steaming station. "You're doing great," slipped into Tremaine's cosmetics supply drawer. The notes were anonymous, written in generic handwriting that couldn't be traced back to him. But throughout the morning, he watched as each discovery brought momentary smiles to faces that had grown accustomed to criticism. Rosa held her note for several seconds before carefully folding it into her pocket. Tremaine looked around with curious wonder, as if kindness had become so foreign that its source seemed magical. Marcus also began strategically positioning himself to deflect Patricia's worst impulses. When she approached the shoe department with her characteristic storm cloud expression, he would accidentally spill cleaning solution nearby, requiring immediate attention that drew her focus away from vulnerable employees. When her voice began rising at the jewelry counter, he would knock over a display of cleaning supplies, creating just enough distraction to break her momentum. His most meaningful intervention came when he overheard Rosa on her lunch break, speaking quietly on her phone with obvious distress. "Mama's blood sugar spiked again last night," she was saying. "The new medication isn't covered by our insurance, and I don't know how we'll afford along with Esperanza's textbooks this semester." Marcus excused himself and made a quick call to the store's pharmacy liaison, a service he had established but never publicized properly. Within an hour, a pharmacy representative arrived with information about patient assistance programs and manufacturer discounts that could reduce Rosa's mother's medication costs by 70%. "I don't understand," Rosa said when the representative approached her during her break. "I never applied for any assistance programs." Sometimes these things happen automatically when pharmacies review accounts for potential savings, the representative explained with practiced discretion. "We're always looking for ways to help long-term customers manage their healthcare costs." Rosa's eyes filled with tears of relief as she signed the paperwork that would dramatically reduce her family's financial burden. Marcus watched from across the store, his heart full despite the deception required to help her. His intervention with Tremaine was more direct. The young man had been struggling with the complex color coordination requirements of the cosmetics displays, not from lack of ability, but from lack of proper training. During a quiet moment, Marcus approached his station with a spray bottle and cloth. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I couldn't help but notice your display work. You have a good eye for color relationships." Tremaine looked surprised. "Really? Mrs. Blackwood says I'm hopeless at visual merchandising." Marcus began cleaning nearby surfaces while speaking in a conversational tone. "I used to work for a company that did window displays. The trick with cosmetics is thinking about color temperature first, then intensity. You're already doing the hard part by grouping complementary shades. Just try arranging them from cool to warm within each color family." As Marcus demonstrated with a few subtle adjustments, Tremaine's face lit up with understanding. The display immediately looked more professional and appealing. "That makes so much sense," Tremaine said excitedly. "Why didn't anyone ever explain it that way before?" "Some managers forget that teaching is part of leading," Marcus replied carefully. "Good employees deserve good guidance." Throughout the day, Marcus found other ways to support his staff without revealing his identity. He reported a malfunctioning cash register to maintenance before the cashier got blamed for transaction delays. He quietly restocked supply closets so employees wouldn't face criticism for empty shelves. He even arranged for the break room coffee machine to be upgraded, a small comfort that brought genuine appreciation from the staff. The cumulative effect was subtle but noticeable. Conversations in hallways carried slightly more energy. Employees made eye contact with each other more frequently. The oppressive atmosphere of constant fear began showing small cracks as people remembered what support felt like. But Marcus knew these small victories were temporary without addressing the root cause of the toxic culture. Patricia Blackwood's reign of intimidation would eventually overwhelm any positive changes he could implement from his disguised position. His growing attachment to these employees, particularly Rosa, made the situation increasingly difficult to endure. During the afternoon break, he found Rosa in the employee cafeteria again, this time reviewing what appeared to be job applications. Her face showed a mixture of hope and worry as she carefully filled out each form. "Looking for something new?" Marcus asked gently, taking a seat across from her. Rosa glanced up with embarrassment. "I probably shouldn't be doing this here, but I can't afford to take time off for job hunting. With Mama's medication costs going down and Esperanza needing help with school expenses, I thought maybe I could find something with better pay or at least a kinder environment." "You deserve both," Marcus said with conviction. "Any company would be lucky to have someone with your experience and dedication." Rosa smiled sadly. "That's kind of you to say, but most places see a 56-year-old woman with gaps in her employment history. They don't see the years of retail management or the customer service skills I've developed." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Rosa represented everything noble about his workforce, yet the culture he had unknowingly allowed to develop was driving away his most valuable people. The time for passive observation was rapidly approaching its end. The crisis arrived on a Thursday morning with the sharp crack of breaking glass. Rosa had been carefully arranging a display of crystal evening bags when her elbow caught the edge of a delicate perfume bottle. The baccarat crystal shattered against the marble floor in a spray of glittering fragments and expensive fragrance. The accident happened in full view of the morning customers, drawing immediate attention from everyone nearby. Rosa dropped to her knees instantly, trying to gather the pieces with trembling hands while the scent of rare orchids filled the air around her. Marcus was restocking paper towels in a nearby supply station when he heard the crash. He turned to see Rosa's face pale with terror, her movements frantic as she attempted to clean up the damage. Other employees gathered at a respectful distance, their expressions mixing sympathy with relief that they weren't in Rosa's position. The sound of approaching heels announced Patricia's arrival before she came into view. Her face was set in grim satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. She surveyed the scene with predatory calculation, while Rosa continued desperately trying to salvage the irreparable. Well, Patricia announced loudly enough for customers and employees alike to hear clearly. "It seems we have a situation here. Rosa, perhaps you'd like to explain to everyone how a $500 bottle of limited edition Chanel ended up in pieces on my sales floor." Rosa looked up from the fragments, her dignity cracking under the public humiliation. "It was an accident, Mrs. Blackwood. I was adjusting the evening bag display, and my elbow caught the bottle. I take full responsibility, and I'll pay for the replacement for my salary." Patricia's laugh was cold and sharp. "Your salary? Do you have any idea how long it would take you to earn $500 after taxes? This isn't some drugstore perfume we're discussing. This is a collector's item that we may not even be able to reorder." Marcus felt his hands clench around the cleaning supplies he was holding. He wanted to intervene, to reveal himself and end Rose's suffering immediately, but he forced himself to remain in character. This moment was revealing the full extent of Patricia's cruelty, and he needed to witness it completely. "I understand the gravity of the situation," Rosa replied with whatever composure she could muster. "Perhaps we could arrange a payment plan, or I could work additional hours to cover the cost. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." Patricia circled the kneeling woman like a shark sensing blood in the water. "What it takes is competence, which you've clearly demonstrated you lack. This accident represents more than merchandise damage. It represents a fundamental failure of judgment and basic motor skills." The gathered employees shifted uncomfortably while customers began moving away from the uncomfortable scene. Marcus noticed several shoppers leaving the store entirely, their faces showing distaste for what they were witnessing. Furthermore, Patricia continued, raising her voice another notch, "This incident raises serious questions about your fitness for employment here. Someone who can't safely handle basic display work shouldn't be trusted around valuable merchandise. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered your position entirely." Rose's face went ashen at the implied threat. "Please, Mrs. Blackwood," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My family depends on this job. I've been here for 3 years without any incidents. This was truly an accident, nothing more." "Accidents happen when people are careless," Patricia replied with satisfaction. "And carelessness is a luxury we cannot afford in a business built on precision and excellence. I think a suspension without pay while we review your employment status would be appropriate. 2 weeks should give us time to properly evaluate whether you belong here." The cruelty was breathtaking in its calculated precision. Patricia was using Rose's desperate need for employment as a weapon, extracting maximum psychological damage from a simple accident. Marcus watched Rose's shoulders shake as the implications hit her. 2 weeks without pay would devastate her family's already precarious finances. "Mrs. Blackwood, please," Rosa tried once more, her voice breaking. "My mother needs her medications, and my daughter has school expenses. I understand there must be consequences, but perhaps we could find another solution." Patricia's smile was triumphant. "Perhaps you should have thought about those responsibilities before being so reckless with valuable merchandise. Security will escort you from the building, and we'll contact you when we've made our decision about your future here." Marcus felt something snap inside his chest. The systematic destruction of human dignity he was witnessing went beyond poor management into actual cruelty. Rosa represented everything good about his company's workforce, and Patricia was destroying her for the crime of being human. He watched Rosa struggle to her feet, her movements careful and deliberate despite her obvious distress. She removed her name tag with shaking hands and placed it on the counter next to the broken crystal. The gesture carried the weight of someone surrendering more than just a job. The other employees stood frozen, afraid to offer comfort that might draw Patricia's attention to themselves. Tremaine's young face showed barely contained outrage, while the other staff members studied their shoes to avoid witnessing Rosa's final humiliation. Rosa walked toward the exit with whatever dignity she could maintain, her head high despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. As she passed Marcus, their eyes met for just a moment. In that glance, he saw not just personal devastation, but the accumulated weight of years of systematic devaluation. The store fell silent after Rosa's departure, the oppressive atmosphere heavier than ever. Patricia surveyed her remaining employees with obvious satisfaction, as if she had just demonstrated an important lesson about the consequences of imperfection. Marcus continued cleaning the already spotless surfaces around him, his movements mechanical while his mind processed what he had witnessed. The time for passive observation had officially ended. Rose's suspension was the catalyst he needed to act, but his response would require careful planning to ensure justice rather than merely revenge. The broken crystal remained on the floor like a metaphor for everything that had shattered in that moment, including Marcus's ability to remain a silent observer of Patricia Blackwood's reign of terror. The atmosphere in Meridian Luxury Department Store had grown suffocating in the 3 days since Rose's suspension. Employees moved with mechanical precision, their faces carefully neutral as they performed their duties under Patricia's increasingly scrutinizing gaze. The woman seemed energized by her recent demonstration of power, prowling the sales floor like a predator seeking her next victim. Marcus had spent those days in careful observation and quiet planning. His maintenance duties provided perfect cover for documenting the systematic problems he was discovering. Inventory discrepancies that suggested Patricia was manipulating numbers to hide poor performance. Customer complaints that were being buried rather than addressed. Employee schedules that violated company policy regarding break times and overtime compensation. The morning brought an unexpected development in the form of Helen Morrison, the regional director whose reputation for fairness had earned respect throughout the company. Marcus recognized her immediately from corporate meetings, though she had never paid attention to maintenance staff before. Helen was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that missed very little. She arrived without fanfare, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit that spoke of authority without ostentation. Marcus watched from behind his cleaning cart as she surveyed the sales floor with the trained eye of someone who understood retail excellence from the ground up. Patricia emerged from her office within minutes, clearly having been alerted to Helen's arrival by some internal warning system. Her demeanor shifted instantly from predatory manager to obsequious subordinate, a transformation that would have been comedic if it weren't so revealing. "Helen, what a wonderful surprise," Patricia gushed, extending her hand with manufactured warmth. "I wasn't expecting a visit from corporate today. I hope everything is satisfactory with our operation here." Helen shook Patricia's hand with polite coolness. "I received some concerning reports about employee relations and customer service standards. I thought it would be beneficial to observe operations firsthand rather than relying solely on written reports." Marcus positioned himself near a display case that required extended cleaning, allowing him to overhear their conversation while remaining invisible. He watched Patricia's face carefully, noting the micro-expressions of panic that flickered beneath her professional smile. "I can assure you that our standards remain exceptional," Patricia replied quickly. "Our sales numbers are consistently strong, and employee productivity has never been higher. Perhaps whoever contacted you was simply disgruntled about reasonable performance expectations." Helen's response was measured and diplomatic. "I prefer to form my own impressions rather than rely on second-hand accounts. Would you mind if I spent some time observing customer interactions and speaking with staff members?" The request was phrased politely, but Marcus recognized it for what it was, a directive that Patricia couldn't refuse without appearing obstructive. He watched her face carefully, seeing the calculation behind her eyes as she weighed her options. "Of course," Patricia agreed with forced enthusiasm. "Though I should mention that we recently had to suspend an employee for damaging valuable merchandise. It was an unfortunate situation, but maintaining standards sometimes requires difficult decisions." Helen's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught a flicker of interest in her eyes. "What type of damage occurred?" she asked casually. Patricia launched into a detailed account of Rose's accident, carefully framing it as evidence of incompetence rather than simple human error. She emphasized the cost of the broken perfume and Rose's supposed history of performance issues, painting herself as a responsible manager making tough but necessary choices. Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he listened to Patricia's distorted version of events. Rose's 3 years of exemplary service were dismissed as mere adequacy. Her moment of vulnerability transformed into evidence of fundamental incompetence. Helen listened without comment, occasionally nodding as if accepting Patricia's narrative. But Marcus noticed how her eyes tracked around the store, taking in details that Patricia wasn't mentioning. The tense postures of employees, the way staff members avoided making eye contact with management, the subtle signs of a workplace operating under fear rather than motivation. "I'd like to speak with some of your team members individually," Helen said when Patricia finished her explanation. "Sometimes frontline employees have insights that can help improve overall operations." Patricia's smile became even more strained. "Certainly, though I hope you'll keep in mind that some staff members may not fully understand the complexities of retail management. They see individual decisions without grasping the broader business context." Helen's response was diplomatically noncommittal, but Marcus caught the slight hardening around her eyes. She was beginning to form her own impressions, and they clearly differed from Patricia's carefully crafted presentation. The morning proceeded with Helen conducting quiet conversations with various employees while Patricia hovered nearby like an anxious chaperone. Marcus watched the interactions carefully, noting how employees' responses were carefully measured and diplomatic, clearly fearful of saying anything that might reach Patricia's ears. It was Tremaine who finally broke the pattern. The young man's natural honesty overcame his caution when Helen asked him about training and professional development opportunities. "I've learned more from a maintenance staff than from formal training programs," he admitted quietly. "One of the janitors helped me understand color coordination techniques that nobody else ever explained." He seemed to realize immediately that he had said something significant. Helen's interest sharpened visibly. "Which maintenance worker was that?" she asked casually. Tremaine's eyes found Marcus across the store. "The older gentleman with the cleaning cart. He obviously understands retail display principles, though I don't know his background." Marcus felt Helen's gaze settle on him with new attention. For a moment, their eyes met across the sales floor, and he saw recognition beginning to dawn in her expression. Helen Morrison had attended enough corporate meetings to remember faces, even when they appeared in unexpected contexts. The investigation was about to take a dramatic turn, and Marcus realized that his carefully maintained cover was beginning to unravel. Helen's presence had changed the dynamic of his mission in ways he hadn't anticipated, forcing him to consider whether the time for revelation had arrived sooner than planned. Helen Morrison's penetrating gaze lingered on Marcus for several long moments before she turned her attention back to Tremaine. The young man shifted nervously, sensing that his casual comment had opened a door he hadn't intended to unlock. "That's interesting," Helen said thoughtfully. "Professional development often comes from unexpected sources. What specific techniques did he share with you?" Before Tremaine could respond, Patricia intervened with barely concealed irritation. "I'm sure our maintenance staff means well, but formal training protocols exist for good reasons. We can't have unauthorized personnel providing guidance that might conflict with established procedures." Helen's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but Marcus caught the subtle tightening around her eyes. "Of course," she agreed smoothly, "though I found that practical knowledge often emerges organically in well-functioning teams. It speaks well of your culture when employees support each other across departmental boundaries." The comment was expertly crafted to sound complimentary, while highlighting Patricia's defensive reaction. Marcus admired Helen's skill at extracting information without creating confrontation, a technique he recognized from his own executive experience. As the morning progressed, Marcus found himself walking an increasingly precarious line. Helen's presence had created opportunities to observe Patricia's true behavior, but it also meant operating under much closer scrutiny. Every movement, every interaction was potentially being evaluated by someone with the expertise to recognize inconsistencies. The breaking point came during the lunch hour when Marcus overheard a customer complaint at the jewelry counter. An elderly woman was trying to return a watch that had stopped working within days of purchase, but the sales associate was following Patricia's unwritten policy of discouraging returns through bureaucratic obstacles. "I understand your frustration," the associate was saying with obvious discomfort, "but I'll need the original receipt, the warranty card filled out completely, and approval from management for any return over $200. The process typically takes several days to complete. Marcus knew this was contrary to company policy, which emphasized customer satisfaction and streamlined return procedures. The associate was implementing Patricia's unauthorized restrictions, not official corporate guidelines. He also noticed Helen observing the interaction with growing concern. Unable to remain silent while watching a customer receive poor service in his own store, Marcus made a calculated decision. He approached the jewelry counter with his cleaning supplies, positioning himself close enough to hear the entire conversation. "Excuse me," he said politely to the sales associate. "I couldn't help overhearing, and I think there might be some confusion about return policies." The cleaning staff sometimes hears discussions about procedures during management meetings. The associate looked surprised while Helen's attention focused intently on Marcus. He could feel Patricia's gaze burning into his back as he continued speaking. "If I remember correctly, watches are covered under the 30-day satisfaction guarantee with receipt, and the warranty cards aren't required for returns, only for extended coverage. Management approval is only needed for returns over $500, not $200. The precision of his knowledge was impossible to dismiss as casual observation. Marcus had effectively revealed expertise that no maintenance worker should possess, crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Patricia moved toward them with predatory speed. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said sharply. "Our maintenance staff wouldn't have access to policy information and certainly shouldn't be interfering with customer service procedures." Marcus met her gaze directly for the first time since beginning his undercover mission. "You're right that maintenance staff typically wouldn't know policy details. But sometimes people hear things, and when a customer isn't receiving proper service, it becomes everyone's responsibility to help." The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Patricia's face flushed with anger as she realized that her authority was being questioned by someone she had dismissed as invisible and powerless. Helen stepped forward with diplomatic smoothness. "Perhaps we could resolve the customer's concern first, and then address any procedural questions afterward." The elderly woman was watching the exchange with growing bewilderment, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of an increasingly tense situation. The sales associate, caught between conflicting authorities, looked to Patricia for guidance. But Helen's presence made defying corporate policy impossible, and the return was processed quickly and courteously. The customer left satisfied, but the damage to Patricia's credibility was significant. After the customer departed, Patricia turned on Marcus with unconcealed fury. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but undermining management decisions is grounds for immediate termination. Your job is to clean, not to involve yourself in matters beyond your comprehension." Marcus felt the familiar surge of righteous anger that had driven him to this mission in the first place. "Is customer satisfaction beyond my comprehension?" he asked quietly. "Or is treating employees with basic human dignity something maintenance workers shouldn't understand?" The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down between them. Patricia's face went white with rage while Helen watched the exchange with sharp interest. Other employees had gathered at respectful distances, sensing that something fundamental was shifting in their workplace dynamics. "You're fired," Patricia snapped. "Clear out your things and leave immediately. Security will escort you from the building if necessary." Marcus nodded calmly, beginning to remove his maintenance uniform jacket. As he did, he felt the weight of the executive identification card he had kept hidden throughout his mission. The moment of revelation had arrived, though not in the carefully orchestrated manner he had originally planned. Helen Morrison stepped forward with sudden recognition dawning in her eyes. "Wait," she said quietly, her voice carrying new authority. "I think we should all take a moment to reconsider this situation." Patricia looked at Helen with confusion, while Marcus met the regional director's gaze with steady acknowledgement. The careful choreography of his undercover mission was about to give way to a much more dramatic revelation than anyone in the store could have anticipated. The stage was set for a confrontation that would transform not just individual careers, but the entire culture of Meridian Luxury Department Store. Patricia's face was flushed with triumph as she watched Marcus begin to remove his maintenance jacket. The power she felt in that moment was intoxicating, a validation of her authority over the invisible people who serve her empire. She had finally found an excuse to eliminate the strange janitor who had been making her increasingly uncomfortable with his knowing looks and subtle interventions. "You heard me," she said loudly enough for all nearby employees to hear. "Pack your things and get out. Maybe next time you'll remember that knowing your place is the most important skill in any job." Helen Morrison stepped closer, her expression unreadable as she studied Marcus with growing recognition. Her years in corporate leadership had taught her to read people and situations with precision, and something about this confrontation felt profoundly wrong. Marcus met Patricia's gaze with steady calm as he reached into his jacket pocket. Instead of removing cleaning supplies or personal items, he withdrew a leather wallet and extracted a corporate identification card. The gold lettering caught the overhead lights as he held it where both women could see clearly. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we should discuss what it really means to know one's place." Patricia squinted at the card, her triumph beginning to waver as she struggled to process what she was seeing. The photograph clearly showed the man standing before her, but the title beneath made no sense in her carefully ordered world. Marcus Chun, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Luxury Corporation. The words hit Patricia like a physical blow. Her face went through a rapid progression of emotions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, and finally a sickening realization of the magnitude of her situation. The man she had dismissed as an ignorant janitor was the owner of everything she had spent years trying to control. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're a maintenance worker. You mop floors and empty trash cans. You can't be the CEO." Marcus straightened to his full height, and somehow his entire presence seemed to expand. The submissive posture of the past weeks fell away, revealing the natural authority that had built a retail empire. His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been exactly what you said, someone who mops floors and empties trash. But I've also been watching, listening, and learning about the culture that exists in my own company. What I've discovered has been profoundly disturbing." Helen Morrison's expression showed a mixture of admiration and concern. She had suspected something unusual about the maintenance worker, but the reality exceeded her most creative speculation. The CEO of one of the region's most successful retail chains had been working undercover in his own store, documenting problems that had somehow escaped corporate attention. Patricia's world was collapsing around her as the implications hit with devastating force. Every cruel comment, every humiliating confrontation, every abuse of power had been witnessed by the one person with absolute authority to end her career. The invisible janitor she had tormented was the man who signed her paychecks. "But why?" she stammered, her usual composure completely shattered. "Why would you do this to me? Why the deception?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice carrying the accumulated weight of weeks of witnessed cruelty. "I did this because I received reports about employee morale and customer service issues that didn't match our company values. I needed to understand what was really happening before making decisions that would affect people's lives and careers." He gestured toward the employees who had gathered at respectful distances, all watching the confrontation with fascination and growing understanding. Rosa Delacroix should never have been suspended for an accident, especially not in the cruel and public manner you chose. Tremaine deserves proper training and encouragement, not constant criticism. Every person who works here deserves to be treated with basic human dignity. Patricia's face had gone completely pale as she realized the full scope of her exposure. "You were spying on me," she said desperately, grasping for some moral high ground. "You deceived everyone. That's not ethical leadership." Marcus's expression hardened with controlled anger. "What's not ethical is creating a workplace culture based on fear and intimidation. What's not ethical is suspending a hardworking employee to make an example of her vulnerability. What's not ethical is treating people as disposable resources instead of human beings with families and dreams." The gathering employees began whispering among themselves as they processed the revelation. Tremaine's face showed wonder and vindication as he realized that his instincts about the helpful janitor had been correct. Other staff members looked between Marcus and Patricia with growing excitement as they understood that their tormentor's reign was ending. Helen Morrison finally spoke, her voice carrying administrative authority. "Patricia, I think we need to have a private conversation about your future with this company." Marcus turned to her with grateful acknowledgement, recognizing that his regional director understood the gravity of what had been uncovered. Patricia made one last desperate attempt to salvage her position. "Mr. Chun," she said with forced formality, "I was simply maintaining high standards and ensuring profitable operations. Sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for business success. Surely you understand the pressures of retail management." Marcus shook his head with profound disappointment. Profitable operations don't require destroying people's dignity. High standards don't mean treating employees like enemies. I built this company on the principle that success comes from empowering people, not breaking them down. The truth was finally out, and the reckoning had begun. The silence that followed Marcus's revelation stretched across the sales floor like a hell breath. Employees continued gathering at respectful distances, their faces showing a mixture of amazement, vindication, and cautious hope. The man they had watched being dismissed and humiliated was revealing himself to be the most powerful person in their professional lives. Patricia stood frozen in a nightmare of her own making, her mind racing through weeks of interactions that had suddenly taken on catastrophic significance. Every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every moment of petty tyranny had been witnessed by the one person who could destroy her career with a single decision. Helen Morrison stepped forward with the decisive authority that had made her one of the company's most respected executives. "Patricia," she said firmly, "we need to discuss this situation immediately. My office will suffice for our conversation, assuming Mr. Chan approves of the arrangement." Marcus nodded his agreement while maintaining his focus on Patricia. The woman who had terrorized his employees for months was now a broken figure, her usual predatory confidence replaced by visible panic. But his years of executive experience had taught him that true leadership required measured responses rather than emotional reactions. "Before we address your employment status," Marcus said to Patricia with calm authority, "there are immediate actions required to correct the damage you've caused. Rosa Delacroix will be reinstated immediately with full back pay for her suspension period. She'll also receive a formal apology for the public humiliation she endured." Patricia's face crumpled as she realized her desperate situation was only getting worse. "Mr. Chun," she began weakly, "perhaps we could discuss this privately. There might be aspects of the situation that weren't immediately apparent during your observation period." Marcus's expression remained unmoved by her attempt at negotiation. "Everything I observed was crystal clear. You created a culture of fear and intimidation that directly contradicts every value this company was built upon. There's nothing to discuss regarding your fundamental approach to leadership." Tremaine stepped forward with newfound courage, his young face bright with understanding and gratitude. "Sir," he said to Marcus, "I wanted to thank you for the display training you gave me. It made such a difference in my work, and I never understood why anyone would want to help me improve until now." The simple statement carried profound weight in the charged atmosphere. Marcus smiled at the young man with genuine warmth, seeing in Tremaine's earnest gratitude everything that made leadership worthwhile. "You improved because you have talent and dedication," Marcus replied. "Good managers don't create success. They recognize it and help it flourish. Anyone who told you otherwise was wrong." Patricia watched this exchange with growing desperation as she realized how completely her version of management was being repudiated. Every employee interaction was becoming evidence against her leadership philosophy, each moment of kindness highlighting her years of unnecessary cruelty. Helen Morrison consulted her phone briefly before addressing the gathered staff. "I need to make some calls to arrange immediate policy clarifications and staffing adjustments. Marcus, would you be available to address the team while I handle the administrative details." Marcus stepped into the center of the group, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. The employees who had spent weeks seeing him as invisible were now looking at him with respect and curiosity, eager to understand how their world had suddenly transformed. "I want each of you to know," he began with sincere conviction, "that what you've experienced under Patricia's management does not represent this company's values. You deserve to work in an environment where your contributions are valued, your growth is supported, and your dignity is never questioned." Several employees nodded enthusiastically while others wiped away tears of relief. The oppressive atmosphere that had dominated the store for months was lifting like a fog burned away by sunlight. "Rosa Delacroix will be returning tomorrow with a promotion to assistant manager," Marcus continued, his announcement generating excited murmurs throughout the group. "Her experience and customer service expertise make her ideally suited for leadership responsibilities that should have been recognized long ago." Patricia made a small sound of distress as she realized that her victim was being elevated while her own career crumbled around her. The woman she had systematically humiliated would now hold a position of authority, a reversal that felt like poetic justice to everyone present. Marcus turned his attention back to Patricia with measured disappointment rather than anger. "Your approach to management has caused real harm to real people. Rosa's family suffered financially because of your decision to suspend her over an accident. Tremaine's confidence was damaged by constant criticism instead of constructive guidance. Every employee here has spent months walking on eggshells because you confused fear with respect." "I was trying to maintain standards," Patricia said weakly, her last attempt at justifying the unjustifiable. "Standards," Marcus replied firmly, "are about excellence, not intimidation. They're about helping people reach their potential, not making them afraid to try. You turn standards into weapons, and that's not leadership, it's abuse of power." Helen Morrison returned from her phone calls with brisk efficiency. "The corporate office is sending temporary management support while we restructure the leadership team. Patricia, your employment is terminated effective immediately, with security arrangements for your departure already in place." Patricia's legs seemed to buckle as the finality of her situation hit her. Years of career advancement were ending in disgrace, her reputation destroyed by her own actions. She looked around the group of employees she had tormented, perhaps finally seeing them as human beings rather than obstacles to her authority. The transformation was complete. The invisible janitor had become the revealed CEO, the tormentor had fallen, and the oppressed were being lifted up. Justice had arrived in the form of someone who understood that true power meant using authority to protect and empower others, not to diminish them. The following morning brought Rosa Delacroix through the doors of Meridian Luxury Department Store with a mixture of nervous anticipation and cautious hope. Word had spread quickly through the employee network about the previous day's dramatic revelations, but she could barely process the reality that her suspension had ended with a promotion rather than termination. Marcus was waiting near the main entrance, no longer disguised as a maintenance worker, but dressed in the understated elegance that marked him as the successful executive he had always been. His smile was warm and genuine as he approached Rosa, extending his hand in greeting. "Welcome back," he said with sincere conviction. "Though I suppose I should properly introduce myself this time. I'm Marcus Chun, and I owe you an apology for the deception of the past few weeks." Rosa accepted his handshake with wonder still evident in her expression. "Mr. Chun, I honestly don't know what to say. When Helen Morrison called me yesterday evening, I thought it was some kind of mistake or cruel joke." "The mistake was mine," Marcus replied firmly, "for allowing a culture to develop that made your experience here so difficult. But that changes now, starting with recognizing the expertise and leadership qualities you've demonstrated despite everything you've endured." Helen Morrison joined them with her characteristic blend of warmth and efficiency. "Rosa," she said with a welcoming smile, "I prepared orientation materials for your new position as assistant manager. We'll be implementing several policy changes that I think you'll find encouraging." As they walked through the store, Rosa marveled at the transformation in atmosphere. Employees who had moved with tense caution just days before now carried themselves with renewed confidence. Tremaine was arranging a cosmetics display with obvious pride in his work, applying the techniques Marcus had shared during their disguise conversation. The young man looked up as they approached, his face brightening with gratitude and excitement. "Mr. Chun," he called out with enthusiasm, "I wanted to show you how the color coordination method has improved our sales. Yesterday, we had 3 customers specifically compliment the display organization." Marcus examined Tremaine's work with genuine appreciation. "This is exactly what happens when talent meets proper guidance," he said approvingly. "Have you considered pursuing formal training in visual merchandising? The company has educational assistance programs that could help advance your career." Tremaine's eyes widened with possibility. "I never thought about continuing education," he admitted. "Mrs. Blackwood always said retail was a dead-end job for people without better options." Rose's face darkened at the mention of Patricia's poisonous philosophy. "That woman spent years convincing people they weren't capable of growth," she said with controlled anger. How many dreams did she kill with that attitude? Marcus felt the familiar surge of determination that had driven his undercover mission. "That's exactly why change was necessary," he said firmly. "Every person here has potential that deserves recognition and support. Our job as leaders is to help that potential flourish, not suppress it." They continued their tour through departments that were already showing signs of cultural transformation. The shoe section buzzed with collaborative energy as associates shared customer service techniques without fear of criticism. The jewelry counter operated with renewed attention to detail, employees taking pride in their expertise rather than hiding behind cautious mediocrity. At the evening section where Rosa had been working when her suspension began, she paused with visible emotion. "This is where I felt most useful," she confided to Marcus. "Working with these beautiful gowns reminded me of my boutique days, when I helped women find perfect outfits for special occasions." Marcus studied the displays with the eye of someone who understood both fashion and business. "Rosa, would you be interested in restructuring this entire department? Your boutique experience gives you insights that could transform our approach to luxury evening wear." Rosa's face lit up with excitement and possibility. "I have so many ideas," she admitted eagerly. "Customer consultation areas, seasonal showcase events, partnerships with local designers. I've been thinking about these improvements for months, but never imagined anyone would want my input." Helen Morrison smiled at Rosa's enthusiasm. "That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we want to encourage," she said warmly. "Marcus has authorized budget increases for department improvements, and your vision for evening work could become our flagship showcase." The morning progressed with Marcus and Helen working alongside Rosa to implement immediate changes. Employee break rooms were upgraded with comfortable seating and better amenities. Communication boards were installed to recognize achievements and share improvement suggestions. Most importantly, an open-door policy was established that encouraged feedback without fear of retaliation. During lunch, Marcus found himself in the employee cafeteria that had become his refuge during the undercover weeks. But instead of eating alone while observing tensions, he was surrounded by staff members eager to share ideas and express gratitude for the cultural transformation. "Mr. Chun," one of the cashiers said during their conversation, "I wanted you to know that work feels different now. Like we're actually part of something meaningful instead of just trying to survive until quitting time. That's what a workplace should feel like," Marcus replied with satisfaction. "When people feel valued and supported, everyone benefits: employees, customers, and the business itself." Rosa approached their table with a proposal document she had been preparing throughout the morning. "I've outlined my ideas for the evening wear department restructuring," she said with professional confidence that had been missing during her weeks under Patricia's management. Marcus reviewed her detailed plans with growing admiration. Rosa's proposal demonstrated sophisticated understanding of luxury retail, customer psychology, and operational efficiency. Her boutique experience, combined with years of observation, had produced insights that could genuinely transform their evening wear business. "This is exceptional work," he said with sincere praise. I want you to present these ideas to our next regional management meeting. Your expertise deserves a wider audience. The day concluded with Marcus addressing the entire staff, sharing his vision for their store's future and commitment to maintaining the positive changes they had implemented. As employees dispersed with renewed energy and purpose, he felt the deep satisfaction that came from using power to lift others up rather than tear them down. 6 weeks after the revelation, Marcus Chun stood in his corporate office overlooking the city, holding a framed photograph that had arrived in his morning mail. The image showed Rosa Delacroix cutting a ribbon at the grand reopening of the redesigned evening wear department, surrounded by employees whose faces radiated genuine joy and professional pride. Her transformation from suspended maintenance worker to celebrated department manager represented everything he had hoped to achieve through his undercover mission. The changes at Meridian Luxury Department Store had exceeded even his most optimistic expectations. Rosa's innovative evening, where Showcase had increased department sales by 40%, while generating glowing customer reviews that praised both the merchandise presentation and exceptional service. Tremaine had enrolled in a visual merchandising certification program and was already training new employees in display techniques that enhanced the entire store's aesthetic appeal. Marcus's desk was covered with reports documenting the cultural transformation. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements across every metric. Customer complaints had virtually disappeared, replaced by commendations that specifically mentioned staff helpfulness and expertise. Most significantly, employee turnover had dropped to the lowest levels in company history as people rediscovered pride in their work. A gentle knock interrupted his reflection. Rosa Delacroix entered with the confident bearing of someone who had found her proper place in the professional world. Her assistant manager blazer was perfectly tailored, her smile warm with the satisfaction that came from meaningful work and genuine respect. "Mr. Chun," she said with professional warmth, "I want to share the final numbers from our evening wear launch event. We exceeded projected sales by 60%. And we've already booked 3 private consultation appointments for next month." Marcus reviewed the detailed report with genuine admiration for Rosa's business acumen. "Your boutique experience really shows in these results," he said appreciatively. "Have you given any thought to expanding the concept to other departments?" Rosa's eyes sparkled with entrepreneurial excitement. "Actually, I've been discussing collaboration opportunities with the accessories team," she admitted. "We could create complete outfit consultations that showcase jewelry, shoes, and handbags alongside the evening wear. The profit margins would be exceptional, and customers would receive truly personalized service." Marcus felt the deep satisfaction that came from watching talent flourish when given proper support and recognition. "That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking that drives business growth," he said with conviction. "I want you to develop a full proposal for the Corporate Expansion Committee." The conversation was interrupted by 80-year-old Lily Chun, who bounded into the office with her usual enthusiasm. She had been spending more time at the store since the transformation began, fascinated by the positive energy and eager to understand her father's work. "Daddy," she announced breathlessly, "Miss Rosa showed me the pretty dresses, and everyone seems so happy now. Why were people sad before?" Marcus knelt to his daughter's level, considering how to explain complex workplace dynamics to a child's understanding. "Sometimes grown-ups forget how to be kind to each other at work," he said gently. "When that happens, everyone feels worried and unhappy. But when people remember to treat each other with respect, work becomes a place where everyone can do their best." Lily nodded with the serious expression she wore when processing important information. "Like how you taught me to share my toys and say nice things to my friends," she said with 80-year-old wisdom. "Exactly like that," Marcus confirmed, exchanging a meaningful look with Rosa, who was smiling at the innocent profundity of the child's observation. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus found himself reflecting on the lessons his undercover experience had taught him about leadership and human dignity. Walking through the store in disguise had revealed how easily power could corrupt well-intentioned people, and how quickly toxic cultures could develop when leadership lost connection with frontline realities. The evening brought the store's monthly recognition ceremony, a new tradition that celebrated employee achievements and innovations. Marcus watched from the audience as Rosa presented awards to team members who had embraced the cultural transformation. Tremaine received recognition for his display innovations, while other employees were honored for customer service excellence and collaborative problem-solving. But the most meaningful moment came when Rosa took the podium to address her colleagues. 6 weeks ago, she began with quiet emotion. "I thought my career was over because of an accident with a perfume bottle. I was suspended, humiliated, and convinced that I had no value beyond my ability to follow instructions without question." The audience listened with rapt attention as she continued. "Today, I stand before you as assistant manager of a department that has exceeded every performance metric, working with colleagues who support each other's success rather than competing for survival. The difference isn't the work itself. It's the leadership that recognizes human worth and nurtures human potential." Marcus felt tears threatening as Rosa's words captured everything he had hoped to accomplish. Her journey from desperation to leadership represented the transformative power of treating people with dignity and recognizing their inherent value. After the ceremony, as employees gathered for refreshments and conversation, Marcus was approached by Helen Morrison with a proposal that would extend the cultural transformation beyond a single store. "Marcus," she said with executive urgency, "the corporate board has reviewed the Meridian store results, and they want to implement similar cultural audits across the entire chain. Would you be willing to conduct undercover assessments at other locations?" Marcus considered the proposal with careful thought. The idea of repeating his disguised observations held appeal, but he had learned that sustainable change required more than dramatic revelations. It demanded consistent commitment to treating every employee as a valuable human being whose contributions mattered. "I think we can achieve the same results through transparent leadership development and employee empowerment programs," he replied thoughtfully. The undercover approach was necessary to understand the problem, but solving it requires ongoing commitment to the right values. As the evening concluded and employees headed home with renewed energy for tomorrow's work, Marcus lingered in the store that had become a symbol of positive transformation. The space hummed with the quiet satisfaction of people who felt valued and supported in their professional lives. His phone buzzed with a text message from Rosa. "Thank you for seeing the person I could become when I could only see the person I was trapped being. Your leadership gave me back my dreams." Marcus smiled as he considered how to respond, then typed back, "Great leaders don't create greatness. They recognize it and help it flourish. You always had extraordinary potential. I just helped remove the obstacles." If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've witnessed similar hidden talents in someone you know.